You're listening to Top Lyne Winnipeg with Nik and Mikey Garcia, presented by From Financial.
Welcome back to Top Lyne Winnipeg, brought to you by our good friends over at From Financial. Me and Mikey are here this week to take a bit of an overview of just how these Winnipeg Jets have fared over their last 20 games. We're going to dive into some of the numbers across all the lines, the D, the goaltending. Obviously, this is coming off a big feel-good win yesterday. Mikey and I really enjoyed the post-game show and all that were a part of it. But I don't know if the vibes will be quite as high when we're breaking down the big picture of the Winnipeg Jets today. But I don't want to do this alone. I already introduced that he's coming in. Mikey, how you doing on this Sunday evening, buddy?
Doing pretty good. I'm excited to get into this with the Jets, take a bit of a deeper look at what we've got going on with this group. Because like you said, there's some, high vibes that we've been riding on the post-game shows after some of those real intense wins. But this gives us an opportunity now to look at where they can really improve and go from being a really good team and an exciting team to a contending team.
For sure. And, we are talking about the first place Winnipeg Jets, though they are third by points percentage. They have a little bit of a games played bump on both Vegas and the Washington Capitals. They lead the league with a plus 41 goal differential. Some good signs, some good stuff there as far as the standings and whatnot. Great sparkling home record, 12-3-1. The road has gotten tougher on them at 12-7-0. But it almost feels like the tale of two seasons so far in Winnipeg. You had that historic 15-1-0 start where I think everybody was realistic about the idea that was not some sustainable brand of hockey. Even the best teams in the world never go on a stretch like that. And the Winnipeg Jets pulled it off, and it was a ton of fun. And now we've seen, since then, since that stretch, 19 games, 9-9-1, a 500 record. Since that 15-1 start, quite the drastic turnaround. And let's dive into it. We brought the Rangers game into this just because 20 is a nice round number. Where should we start taking a peek at first here, Mikey? What do you want to dive into first when it comes to Winnipeg Jets?
I think it's the forward group. That's the biggest group. That's the spot where the Jets, I think, have the most to play with. So that's probably a good place to jump into.
Yeah. So obviously, we know the Winnipeg Jets have a set lineup at this point. They've played 35 games. They have the first, the second, the ninth most played lines in the NHL. There's clearly a formula that the Winnipeg Jets believe is going to take them to the promised land. We have not seen them deviate from said formula through 35 games and a 19-game stretch at 500, which to me is a red flag and a big concern, and we're going to dive into why as this show goes on. But let's take a look at some of these the forward groups here first. Let's start right at the top. Obviously, a line I have my faults with. Though I also will say, and you're going to see it in these numbers here, this team's probably at 500 because this line's been producing on the offensive side throughout this stretch, and there hasn't been much help below it. Through the last 20 games, the Connor, Scheifele, Velarde line, losing the shot attempts battle, very, very small margin. They're losing it 248 to 256 for 49.2% of the shot share. Again, this is a group where I think the shot attempts at that level, they could sustain. We know they got the shooting talent. We know that they create their offense with like cross-ice seams and whatnot, which creates a higher difficulty of shot. And we're also seeing in their advanced analytics, their expected goals despite getting outshot attempted is actually on the positive side at 52.34%. Probably the best number we've seen from this group in the year and a half that they've been together. Encouraging sign there. And they've outscored their opposition 14-10. Good for 58% of the goals for. And and they continue to outshoot the opposition in the high danger opportunities, 45-39. Positive progression. What is Mikey seeing from the top line? What's he think of those metrics? And what are they telling us about the Jets top line right now?
That line is interesting because, like you pointed out, they're getting technically outshot every, across the those last 20 games there overall. But it's not to a point where, like, they're still going and they're getting those high danger chances. Their high danger goals expected as well are extremely high. So they're getting into those tough areas. They're fighting their way to the front of the net in the offensive zone. And especially when you've got a guy like Gabe Vilardi, that's what you want to see from that group. You want to see the high danger chances in their favor because that's where they're going to find a lot of those goals. And then you've got Mark Scheifele and Kyle Connor who have that incredible shooting talent to sustain on less opportunities, right? So they're a frustrating group to watch defensively for sure. We've talked about it, how when they're not on, it's real obvious, it's real in your face, and it can be tough to watch. But as an offensive group, they're highly talented. They can definitely outscore the opposing team's top lines most of the nights, but not all of them. And when that opposition gets to a much higher level of competition, that's when we start to see them shrink down a bit. So they can beat up on the small teams. They can definitely hang in there with the majority of the good teams in the league. But when they get faced up against the elite teams and teams with a high degree of speed, it gets shown where those holes are from that group. So, definitely happy to see them getting those high danger chances and the high danger goals. But we need to see a change somewhere, either personnel wise or style wise with that group, because when it comes to facing the top teams, they're still getting caved in.
And the first, I think that's a great summary of it. We know that line creates some pretty highlight reels. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe you were telling me, or someone had texted me surprised by it, that they were one of the top 3 scoring lines in the NHL this year. And they've definitely created some good looks. And even in games when they've just been off on some quality looks. But I do see that differential on what that group looks like against the lower end teams, where that's one of the most fun lines to watch, and I get why people would be excited about it. Like, they put on some real highlight reels against some of the lesser teams, as we expect. But then games like in this stretch that stand out, and it's going to be those teams that you're seeing in the playoffs that you got to get through. The Vegas game was a classic example of why I do not trust this process behind this line when it gets to the playoffs. Vegas, a team that's able to lean on them physically and doesn't give up those big seams that they could expose, and they do a real good job of exposing, as one example. Dallas was in that stretch where didn't love what I saw from them there. We saw the 5-0 Florida game. So it's one of those lines, and we've talked about it. The game after that Florida game was probably one of their best games together, so that does play each other out. But it is one of those lines I still don't trust big picture to get the Jets over the hump. I think it's been productive, and they've taken strides that they've been better than last year, bar none. And through this stretch, like I said, without that group scoring, especially with the Lowry line fall off that we're going to probably be talking about here, 500 might have been generous during this stretch, and they deserve a lot of credit in this stretch for keeping it at 500, at 5-on-5, being able to outscore those minutes and putting together a stretch like this. I just still don't buy it when we get to those tougher matchups, when we get to that playoff style game, given how that line works and given how it does struggle defensively when getting leaned on. It remains my big concern, but overwhelmingly over the last 20 games, it's been a step forward. It's been a step forward. It's been a positive. Those are margins you like to see compared to what we were seeing. Yep. I still have my big doubts when we get to some of those bigger matchups and what those teams could kind of do to slow down that group. Yeah.
So just going off of what you said there. So in terms of goals for, that line is number 1 in the NHL with 22 goals for. The issue is, though, it's because they've played a hell of a lot more minutes together than any other of the other lines. When you adjust it for goals for per 60 minutes, they drop down from being first all the way down to all the way down to 98.
So, I'm guessing there's no minute tie in there. I'm guessing
minimum 50 minutes as a group.
Okay, yeah.
So even adjusted to remove players that have only played like a handful of minutes, minimum 50 minutes adjusted, they're 98th. when it's goals adjusted for 60 minutes. So, yeah, they've scored the most goals for together, but they've played considerably more together. They've played 447 minutes as a group. The next closest is 344. They've played over 100 more minutes together. So, yeah.
It's the most played line in the NHL this year.
By far. Like, it's not even close.
So, yeah, this is the Jets way.
Yep.
35 games with no switches is insane to me.
It's incredible.
You've seen some good hockey out of them. You've seen those downsides that people like me really hit home with. We'll see where this continues to go. At some point, here's one for you. Plus or minus game 41 before we see an actual shift. Do they get through half the season without making a single line change in Winnipeg?
Only if there's not a massive addition at the deadline, because the deadline will come before 41, right?
No.
No?
Game 41's in like 6 games, brother.
Are we already? Oh, yeah, you're right. Oh, then no. Yeah, 100%. No, 0%. There will
We're
be
gonna
no
be at
change.
like 60 by then. We're going to be at 60 by then.
Man, I didn't realize we were already, I forgot, 35. Yeah, no, 0% chance they make that change. It'll go 50% of the season with these 4 groups being untouched.
So let's move it on down. Obviously, part of this stretch, Nick Ehlers was gone from. And honestly, I follow Perfetti, Nemestikov, put in some quality minutes together. That's something we talked about. My hot take was when Ehlers went down, it would actually be a benefit to that group of players, even though missing Nick Ehlers from the power play and the Jets at 5-on-5 was a big loss. I actually just felt that threesome would do better. And we did see some great metrics from IFL and Nemestikov and Perfetti when they do play together. It's a really interesting thing. But we know that they see Ehlers, Perfetti, Nemestikov as the second line, so that's how we're going to look at this. They got in 11 games during that 20-game stretch for 96 minutes. They outshot their opposition 93-88 in shot attempts. They've outscored their opposition 4-2 on 49.1% expected goals. So that's been a bump up from what they were doing early on in the season. They're still getting outshot attempted in the high danger areas, which remains a concern for me, 20-15. But a marginal step up for that group in its last 11 games than what we were seeing early. Is this a group you're starting to believe in with a step up?
It's going in the right direction, and you've got really talented guys in both Nick Ehlers and Cole Perfetti. And I like them together from an off-ice standpoint. I like the idea of Cole getting to, work a lot with Nick Ehlers when it comes to practice and those type of things, because you're playing with them a lot. I'm hoping that some of those Ehler traits, rub off on Cole Perfetti. It's just that they're very different types of players, and sometimes that chemistry on the ice doesn't quite work the way that you want, right? You've got Ehlers, a guy who thinks the game in 2x speed, with a guy like Cole Perfetti who's playing more of a chess game and trying to pick up, steps 1 and 2, coming up. So it's just they work a little bit differently. So I'd rather see a bit of a different look on that line, but it is positive to see that when they do link up, you get some, again, like we talked about on the first line, some highlight reel plays, and it can be real nice. But overall, long term, I think we're going to have to see a different look to that line eventually if the Jets really want to compete long term.
Yeah, I look at this line as basically, because the Winnipeg way is the Lowry line's locked, the first line's locked. You're trying to get as much out of whatever you have left with the second and fourth lines, the way Winnipeg's operating. And I still feel like it's a square, trying to shove a square piece into a round hole when it comes to the style element of Nick Ehlers and Cole Perfetti's games. I just don't see that pairing as a pairing that's going to get you to the sum of their parts. Like we've talked about, these are you just mentioned, 2 highly skilled players, 2 talented players. We know Nick Ehlers has been the 5-on-5 driver in Winnipeg, whether appreciated or not during the span, that you'd expect him to be able to carry a line. And I just don't think, given especially how this roster is constructed and how key those 2 contributing offense really is to the big picture, they're coming off one of their best nights last night in Minnesota. Maybe it's a jumping off point, but again, Minnesota came off a back-to-back. They're banged up. They're sputtering. Not something I'm buying into, and I think the Winnipeg Jets, to get the most out of the pieces that Kevin Cheveldayoff has put together, at some point are going to have to give some different looks in that top 6 with the winger groups, with the centers potentially. We know Vlad's going to be an upgrade later. That's far down the road. Can only talk about it so much. But I do really think they are hampering 2 of their most important offensive players by keeping them together when I don't think it's going to be a fit. We've seen a step forward from both groups, and hey, that's encouraging. It doesn't look right to me. It's not a line I trust. And yeah, I don't think you're getting the most out of both players playing them together.
Yep, I totally agree. And to support that, if you look at over this last 20-game stretch, Ehlers missed 9 of those games. The minutes played for the 3 of them as a line, and the minutes played for Perfetti and Nemestikov with any other player as a third on that line are fairly close. They've played almost the exact same amount. There's about a 10-minute difference between. And it's not a big jump, but there is a slight increase in shot attempts, in high danger chances, in everything for the line without Nick Ehlers on it. So it's not, and that's
nearly 6% bump in expected goals too. Like,
yeah, that's the big one there. No, the expected goals is the big outlier. It's even more so, right? So it just it goes to show you that Nick Ehlers, who's a great player and positively impacts the game at 5-on-5, just doesn't mesh well with that grouping. And you could distribute that 5-on-5 play and that 5-on-5 production that Nick Ehlers brings to, maybe the top line, which has been, sorely looking for that lately. So yeah, it would be better, I think, to break that up. But like we've said, this is the group the Jets really like. This is the one that they've decided is their setup, right? They're the 9th most played group in the NHL by minutes. So,
and this is what's interesting too, because I've seen a lot of the conversation on other shows in the market, talking to people at parties, whatever, talking to people at games, where a lot of people seem to think like Cole Perfetti is the problem and Vlad Nemestikov and Nick Ehlers work really well together. Kind of what you were just talking about. I see it as the other way, where Perfetti and Iafallo kind of do work off each other and how they play the game. And anytime there's a different winger on board there, it looks pretty good. Like, it looks like a line that's all working together, all looking to do the same thing. And I just think, given how important Nick Ehlers is to this team, that's the guy you got to get into that role that's going to help push you over the top. Because I do think Vlad and Cole works, and I'm not as convinced as everyone else seems to be that Vlad and Nick is the pair there.
It definitely, is not. They haven't had a ton of time together, but the time they have together, they got cratered in. So it's definitely not a pairing I would ever think to put together. That's not. Yeah, their styles don't work the same way. By the time Nemestikov realizes what Ehlers is doing and wants to do and gets to that part of the ice, the play's already gone from there. It's just, I think some people just have a weird thought about Cole Perfetti. They look at him as, for whatever reason, too small or not big enough or strong enough or whatever, and they've kind of just let that cloud them watching the game with him, because the numbers don't support that. The eye test doesn't really support that, but people have it in their head at the moment, or not everybody, some people, but that Cole Perfetti is the issue on that line, and I don't know, I just don't see it.
And when it comes to the Vlad Ehlers thing, I think a lot of people get stuck on the fact that like Vlad's a decent support player, so he kind of reads off Ehlers east to west. The problem is when the puck ends up on Vlad's stick, a lot of the time that's where it dies, and that's not what you want around a guy like Nick Ehlers, who's looking to keep things moving. And yeah, the numbers certainly support that as well, which is going to lead into another spot here where the numbers are pretty interesting as we break it down. Kind of continues to probably be over talked about now in the national media when it comes to the Adam Lowry, Mason Appleton, Nino Niederreiter being like the best third line in hockey. And we've seen them. When they're at their best, no argument. They're in that conversation. Yeah. The reality is they haven't been that group for a while now. Let's look at their last 20 games. And this is a line, right, that even when they go into that where they are right now, where games start to become 50-50 and who scores first might depend who wins that matchup, we're used to seeing them still run 55, 56, 57% margins on a lot of the underlying data. They were that line that was at least playing in the O zone, giving those offensive groups a chance to come out next and take advantage. It was what they kind of built their game around, right? And it's why it became the identity around the Winnipeg Jets. Reality is they haven't been giving that for some time here. Let's look at them quickly here. In their last 195 minutes, 20 games played, getting marginally outshot, 202 to 200. Goals for it, 7-6. So we're at that 50-50 split idea again. And when you don't get a night from the top line, all of a sudden, all that other stuff falls downhill, right? And it all plays into this conversation, bigger picture. Yeah. But the big concern, expected goals for a group that, like I said, we're used to seeing really control the flow of play, really get the better chances, get to the harder areas. They're getting beat pretty bad over the last 20 games, sitting at a 46.4%. They're scoring chances for versus against. They're losing 93 to 76, and they're losing those shot attempts in the high danger areas. The identity line isn't quite the identity line right now.
Yeah, it's been a rough go these last 20 games for that line. Compared to what they started the year off at when they were absolutely just, lightning in a bottle. It's a tough style that they play. They play a lot of hard minutes as well, right? So you expect to see a little bit of regression. You expect to see some injury things start to, creep in. But at this point in the season where the Jets are at, especially with the way that they've structured this lineup, they just flat out need that group to be better, to be more. They need that 55+% out of them to be successful night in, night out. And the last 20 games have been, a lot closer to the 51% of the game. And the high danger chances are the one that are really jumped out at me, that they're losing that battle. You would expect a line with Adam Lowry and Mason Appleton to hopefully keep the front of the net clear on your end. And you would expect a line with Nito Niederreiter on it to be getting those high danger chances for. So the fact that it's not going their way in that spot, especially at the moment, is a little bit concerning. And we're going to have to hopefully see a bit of a bounce back from that group, because they need it. That's the joke is that's the identity line, but it is for the Jets. They need that group pulling just as much as they need the first line, maybe more some nights.
And that's the thing. For this setup to work, they need that first line to take one more step forward, two more steps forward, big steps. They need this line to resort to the version we saw last year, and they need that second line to actually click. If we want to talk about this long run that we're all excited about, the concept that they can go on to, yes, they're first place today. We've also all seen this story for how many years? We could pretend it's different, but when you start to see things sliding this bad, especially at 5-5, and the Winnipeg Jets, the one thing that I find really odd about them, and I do want to think, I don't know what the takeaway here is, but I do believe the Winnipeg Jets are a very good hockey team. I do believe it's no secret they're a consistent playoff team. Since Bones came in and brought in that system, they've been near the top of the league in the regular season. But the one thing I do find different about the Jets, and I wonder a little bit more about than other teams that consistently bet on themselves that they're going to break through in the playoffs after big regular season, after big regular season, after big regular season, the Winnipeg Jets seem to fall out of their game a lot longer stretches of periods than some of those upper end teams. Like one team I think of being the Tampa Bay Lightning's probably the model of this, where it's pretty well documented. They treat the regular season as just a means to an end, and they're just trying to get through 82 games and punch their ticket before turning it on. But you see throughout the year when they've kind of turned it off for a few games too long, John Cooper is really quick to reel that back in, and then they find it for stretches, right? I find it really interesting that when the Jets lose their system and when they lose their game, it just seems to take them a lot longer to find it again. And we're hoping that yesterday was the start of that. That was the closest thing that looked like their template we've seen in some time. But it is my one question is why does it take this core longer to get back to that than other teams? And it's kind of my question here going into the second half, seeing the metrics falling, seeing the team at 5-5, a lot of them being under 50%, and knowing what that means over the course of the season, knowing what that means when the games get tighter and the race gets heavier, and seeing what it's looked like for the Jets in the past, This is a top nine that's just begging for some kind of shakeup, even momentarily. As much as we're calling for like line changes and whatnot, nothing ever has to be permanent. And we know they're going to end up back here after a 5-6 game stretch, anyways. But it just feels like this group needs a spark, needs something different, needs to try something different just to get most of the group back going.
Yeah, it feels like the Jets. So we've seen, like we talked about, right? Out of the 4 lines, they've got the 1st, 2nd, 9th, and 20th most played lines in the NHL. So we know for sure exactly how Scott Arniel wants this lineup to look. I think part of what the issue is, one is they don't have the depth that those other teams do, right? The Tampa at their peak, the Colorado at their peak, the LA and Chicago way back in the day. Those teams that, like you said, will take part of the regular season off. They have the depth to kind of to address those things a little bit easier. Whereas the Jets, as soon as you lose one piece like Dylan Samberg to injury, and since they don't want to experiment with the rest of the lineup, right? It's a plug and play. It's a drop somebody directly into a spot, leave everything else the same. Nick Ehlers goes the same thing, right? Leave everything else the same, drop one guy into a spot. They don't have the depth to be able to do that and keep playing their same brand of hockey. It was real evident on the power play, for example, right? Nick Ehlers goes off of the power play unit number 1 because of the injury. They drop Cole Perfetti into that spot and try to keep everything else the same. Cole Perfetti doesn't work with that power play grouping because of style, right? It was a microcosm of kind of what I think the Jets' bigger issue is. They don't want to experiment when things start to go awry. They want to keep that very rigid structure in place and just hope that everything else will kind of push that lesser piece forward with the group, as opposing to say, okay, here's what I have to work with at the moment. What's the best thing I can do with it? Whereas those other teams are a little more willing to do that, where things are either going wrong, so they switch up some lines, or guys get hurt, so they have to switch up lines. They're more willing to work that out, whereas it seems the Jets want to keep that rigid structure and just hope that a plug and play can, fill the dam, so to speak.
Yeah, no, 100%. And this is actually where Scott Arniel kind of lost me in the media this week, actually. He's getting a lot of praise for challenging his team yesterday and them answering, and I think that's a respectable thing as well. But he got his back up against the wall this week when asked about all the slow starts becoming a regular thing. And this is something we've been talking about. And the thing with slow starts, once you start getting into the meat of NHL teams, guess what? You're going to be fighting back from a deficit with most of those slow starts. When asked about it, instead of having some kind of answer or wanting to address it, we heard Scott Arniel quip back with, this is still a first place team, isn't it? And I have a problem with that quote because it contrasts exactly what I was hyping up with Scott Arniel earlier in this season when things were going well. The one quote that I kept praising, right, was we are what we continuously do. And when you're asked that question in a stretch where you've played 18 games at that point, are under 500 in those 18 games, guess what? Over those 18 games, you're continuously doing something wrong. You're no longer, we are what we continue. So by deflecting it that way, you've gone away from that process-oriented mindset of a head coach that I was respecting early on in this season. And you're getting there and getting frustrated. And yeah, they are still a first-place team. That is true. But as a coach of an NHL team, I expect you to be able to see through that bullshit actually when it comes to the standings and see through the problems your team is facing and actually be able to address them, not run from them and not hide from them. And that was honestly pretty disappointing and a red flag and concern for me when it comes to Scott Arniel. I mean, to be upset with that kind of question in a stretch like that tells me he doesn't have a handle of where his team's playing, or maybe he wants to protect the room and the room's a little soft of harder questions. Or it's just like he hasn't tried to change anything. And at some point, he's got to look at himself as to why those questions are coming. And hey, this is your second opportunity. We're expecting you to be able to make those adjustments. It's one of those things. And it was just disappointing for me to hear someone that I was praising as we are what we continuously do and how important that process-oriented thinking can be to watching someone that's been frozen behind the bench while his team goes 500 for nearly a quarter of the year be upset when asked about why there's some real serious struggles in Winnipeg.
Yeah, that one definitely read to me as two things. One, a coach trying to protect a group of guys that he feels are either going to take a hard word in the media to heart, or, that type of thing. And a coach who maybe is feeling a little defensive over his decisions to not make these changes, whether it's his own decision or one being forced upon him. It felt a little defensive, and I felt like it was either trying to protect the guys in the room or protect himself a little bit, because he knows there is no way Scott Arniel has gotten to a point where he is coaching an NHL team and is looking at the game and looking at the numbers and everything, and not coming to the conclusion that it's not the optimal way for them to be doing business. I don't believe that. I believe that he knows and can see it. It's just whether he truly believes that this is the right way to do it, and he thinks it's going to correct and the ship's going to right itself at some point, or it's something being forced down upon him from, out of his control. I can't say. But I feel like he does know, and that's why he's so defensive when asked about that question. Because if we are what we consistently do, then we are slow starters, period. That is just what we are then. And if we're going to do that into the playoffs, then we're just going to be having those slow starts for, 4 to 6 games at most. It can't be that way come playoff time. So yeah, we're going to have to wait and see what is going to change in Winnipeg, because if it's going to be an injury that forces a change, or if it's going to be a trade that forces a change, there has to be one at some point. Because if we get to game 82 with the exact same groupings as we're pumping out right now, it'll be a short first round exit and a real upsetting summer, here in the prairies.
Yeah, I agree with that conclusion wholeheartedly. And like you said, if we are what we consistently do and we're slow starters, we are that. If we are consistently what we do at a 15-1 stretch as the top of the NHL, guess what? Over a 19-game stretch at 500, we are consistently a 500 hockey team. The bigger the sample's gotten, it hasn't straightened out. It's going the wrong way. And, I mean, your words are out there publicly now. As for what you were preaching in the room, something, again, that I was praising, I'm going to hold you to that standard moving forward. That's just the reality of it.
Yep, that's what
yeah, moving over to the fourth line here, which early on had really become a bit of a change of pace. We're able to push the puck up into the O-zone. Weren't going to score much, but we're at least not giving up as much. That's no longer the case in Winnipeg with the fourth line. Looking at the last 20 games, 18 of which we saw the Rasmus Kupari, Morgan Barron, Alex Iafallo, version of that line, getting out, or they are outshot attempting their opposition 80-70. It's a tie 1-1 game. Expected goals are 49%, and they're losing the high danger shot attempts area. Now, this is a group playing about double-digit minutes. This is a group that, given that, you would expect them to be chipping in more than one goal every 20 games. And this is a group that we just saw a competitive option get sent down that could be taking a job. Where are we at with the fourth line of the Winnipeg Jets, who, again, is coming off a really strong game against Minnesota last night?
Yeah, they had a great game last night. It's a group that brings, a lot of speed when Rasmus Kupari's in there. Some real nice skating when David Gustafsson is centering that line. Alex Iafallo can jump up. He's been able to play on that line as well as, hop up when the injuries and things have struck. So, Morgan Barron's the guy I said would have been the weakest link, and then he went out and had himself a decent game last night. So yeah. They're okay, right? Like you said, you want more than one goal in 20 games, but they've only given up one goal in that stretch as well, right? So from the other side of it, they're not a liability. They're able to give the other groups a bit of a breather, when it's necessary. That's where obviously, you feel like you could definitely start to upgrade by a domino effect when you bring in a guy above who's going to push some of the other players down. And that won't be a bad thing. So, especially since we have that option as well. Like I said, you've got David Gustafsson sitting there who can give that line a totally different look. So if you get some skill and depth above, and you end up forcing, a Mason Appleton or Vlad Nemestikov down to that line, and you've got David Gustafsson down there, all of a sudden, that's a fourth line that you feel pretty confident in putting out there for 10 plus minutes a game. So they've been okay, and I think we can still get more out of it depending on how the rest of the lineup looks.
Yeah, come playoff time, basically you want this to not be looking like a fourth line. You want this to be looking like a secondary third line, right? If we're looking for a long-term run here, think back to that 2017-2018 team where Pro, Little, and Rozovic were playing your fourth line. A lot of those playoff games dependent on how those matchups played. Them and Lowry's line were very matchup dependent in the bottom six of the Winnipeg Jets. And that's how the Winnipeg Jets got to Game 5 of the Western Conference Final. This is a group that's going to need an upgrade, but it is a group I believe will be upgraded internally with trades, right? That whole domino effect, getting a guy like Domestikov down there, having an option like Chibrikov. I mean, like, think of what would a Vlad Chibrikov, Iafallo fourth line feel like? That to me feels like a rather large step forward from what they are currently using.
Yep.
That's all a very it's a borderline third line in the NHL, and you get there with one trade and a willingness to play Chibrikov over Barron simply. So it hasn't been great, it hasn't been terrible. It's a fourth line, but it is an area they're going to have to upgrade, which should come internally as the season goes on.
Yeah, I'd like to see them have Chibrikov playing on that line already, to be honest. Cycling in with Morgan Barron every little while here just to give him some more run, because he looked completely fine in the games that he got when Ehlers was hurt. He looked like an NHL player for most of the time. So if there's a way to have him out there now, getting some of those minutes, getting some more experience behind him before that playoff run comes, I'd be all for it.
Yeah, no, I'm with you there. So basically, to summarize it, safe to say we know what the Winnipeg Jets think is their optimal lineup that's going to get them to the promised line. And it's safe to say both of us think that they should maybe juggle around with that before getting too married to it.
Yep, 100%.
Let's move to the D, which obviously it's missing the second biggest piece in Winnipeg, and I don't think that's a secret anymore if you've watched this stretch of Winnipeg Jets hockey games. Dylan Sandberg's injury has definitely caused a lot of problems back there. It also should have a lot of people reconsidering what they want to do about a certain UFA D-man, and we're going to get there in a second. But let's start up at the top. The last time we did one of these updates, Josh Morrissey and Dylan DeMello were not looking great. The numbers were in the shitter. The underlyings were tough, and we were putting a lot of that on Dylan DeMello. Josh Morrissey continues to be that guy in Winnipeg, and DeMello, as you kind of mentioned last night on the post-game show, was having a lot of those "what the hell were you thinking" DD type moments. It's encouraging last 20 games if you're looking at their results over that span. They've attempted their opposition 260 to 256. They're outscoring their opposition 14 to 10. Expected goals, they are winning that 51.1% of the time, and they are winning the shot attempts in the high danger areas. So we've seen a step up from that group. It is kind of like we have that conversation with the top line. Still need more from it. Still need to get higher margins from that group, especially with how the rest of the defense kind of looks right now. But encouraging to see that step forward. Where are you at with the Jets top deep pairing?
Yeah, this is the step forward that I was really hoping for. I hope it's more than just the 1-2 games that we've seen lately. I'm hoping it's going to be a stretch of quite a few going forward, but their numbers are finally progressing in the right way. They're on the right side of the line for most of it across the board now. The high danger stuff is progressing in the right way, which is wonderful. That's really encouraging to see that they're finally getting that cleared out, because there was a stretch there where DeMello was either nowhere near the front of the net when his guy was, or he was there and it didn't matter and he was just getting shoved out of the way. So it's real nice that stat is rebounded and they're finally getting the dirty areas cleared out from their own end again. They still need more, they still need more from that pairing. The numbers are going to be brought down a little bit by those first 10 games in that stretch where it was still real atrocious. I'm going to be curious to see what this looks like at game 41 when we do the halfway mark, because I'm hoping that it's going to be that this was the start and that they're going to be pulling in there, because as a top pairing, when they're both on, it works. You know, Morrissey and DeMello, they've got the chemistry. They know where to go each other on the ice. And we've seen it work to a level that you can be successful. And then we can worry about, you know, getting Dylan Samberg back and shoring up that second pairing again, and not have to stress and worry, you know, is that top pairing going to work tonight? Is it not going to work tonight? Do we have to move DeMello off of it? Should we move someone else with Morrissey? Is Pionk going to play with Morrissey? It just takes so much of the guessing game away. Samberg comes back, second pairing's fine. And hopefully this is the step for DeMello, and we can get back to, you know, just worrying about the forward group for the most part.
Yeah, but speaking of concerns on the back end, let's move to that second pair without Dylan Samberg. Not good. Not good. The second worst D pairing in the NHL outside of one you'd be familiar with, actually. In over 150 minutes played, only the Savard-Hudson pairing in Montreal has fared worse than Neil Pionk and Hayden Fleury in their stretch since Dylan Samberg went down. They're getting outshot attempted 193 to 150. They're getting outscored 9-5. Expected goals is sitting at a pathetic 34.65%. In the high danger areas, they're getting outshot attempted 41 to 21. Not good, Bob. And as the offensive production continues to pick up, the noise around signing Neil Pionk continues to grow louder, and every red flag is flashing why you do not pay that player long term and more money like he is going to get after this offensive production and the minutes have dictated. I would look at this. If you sign Neil Pionk, it's like almost the reverse of the Buff-Sherratt pairing, where I think Ben Sherratt owes Dustin Byfuglien's family or charity a choice a lot of his career earnings at this point. Yep. That guy doesn't belong in the NHL. He's got two skill sets, and it's cross-check a guy in front of the net and ice the puck.
Yep.
If you were to pay Neil Pionk the life-changing contract I believe is coming his way after this start this summer, you're paying him to be a driver of a decor in which he's the secondary option at 5-on-5 behind a Dylan Samberg. This is where you make the big mistakes in a salary cap league to buy into what you're seeing on the offensive side, a lot of it on the power play with Neil Pionk, while the rest of the 5-on-5 game is a mess. Hayden Fleury was obviously a nice story early in this one, but you're very much seeing why he's been a journeyman press box defenseman. I honestly don't think he's that much better than Logan Stanley, and I don't think he should be in the top six when Samberg's healthy. But you don't pay a guy that putting up this kind of results without Dylan Samberg. And it's not like there's no recent history. Alongside a guy like Brendan Dillon, the metrics were below 50%. Every single person Neil Pionk's played with, other than Dylan Samberg, has not been able to carry what he causes to go awry defensively. And you just do not pay this. Like I get the excitement, goals are fun and all that. This is the spot you get yourself in a world of trouble for the next 4, 5, 6 years if you commit to this player.
Yeah, this is the poster child for what not to do in the NHL. You do not sign, because when his contract comes up this year, he will be 30 years old. You do not sign a 30-year-old defenseman who's never had more than 10 goals, which he's going to break this year, who's never had more than 33 points, who's going to break this year. Beware the magical season. This is every sign says do not sign this player long term. This is a flash in the pan. This is something that is an aberration. And the defensive metrics do not warrant him long-term getting massive, massive money here. It just, everything says do not do it. Let someone else make that mistake. Let him score, 15 goals this year. Let him have, 45, 50 points. And let someone else make that mistake. Let someone else give him the $8 million contract that, his agent's going to be out there looking for. Don't let it be the Winnipeg Jets. There's no reason to do it. outside of blind loyalty, because you're never going to get the production you're getting now. You'll never see it again. You will never see that offensive production again, but you will see this defensive mess for the rest of that contract. And unless Dylan Sandberg feels like carrying around a rock on his ankle for the next, 7 years, it's not worth it. Don't do it. Don't do that to him. Don't do that to us. Chevy, please do not do this.
Legitimately, July 1, I will be sitting there waiting, even though I believe that he's going to sign before July 1 in Winnipeg and we're going to be miserable about it. I will be waiting on July 1 to say whichever team gives him this long-term deal that's coming lost the deadline day. That's how confident I am in not signing this player.
I am going to send that team a basket of mini muffins when they sign him because it just, and you know what? I still truly believe that with every goal, every assist, the way that he keeps racking up the counting stats, I do believe he's pricing himself out of Winnipeg just for the fact that his agent will be able to go out on that open market and get more than what he can get here. Yeah, he'll be able to get the extra year here, which he could play, but I feel like he could get enough AAV somewhere else to make up for that. It might be a pipe dream. I might be wish casting, but I do. At the moment, I believe that he's going to have a big enough season that even if Chevy wants to keep him around, that his agent's going to be able to find him something better on the open market.
So I have two trains of thought here because I see exactly what you're saying. And one of my trains of thought would allow us to end up there. There's one train of thought where I don't think the Jets are going to sign any of their free agents until they have certainty on what Kyle Connor's long-term number is, which would help this conversation quite a bit if they approached it that way.
Yep.
The other train of thought I have, though, and looking at Kevin Cheveldayoff's history, is I look at the Andrew Ladd, Dustin Byfuglien situation. And that was signing one player in season, letting the other, the other got traded. But in this case, because you're a first-place team, potentially letting the other player walk. In this scenario, I think you look at Ehlers and Pionk side by side. Let's put it this way. Chevy almost made the wrong choice, but Andrew Ladd turned down the deal. And it led to us getting Byfuglien for much longer.
Yep.
Wouldn't surprise me if they get it wrong here.
Yeah. And
wouldn't surprise me. In season 2. That's what scares me. Is I wouldn't be surprised to see Neil Pionk sign an extension within the next 4 weeks.
I don't think it'll happen.
Wouldn't surprise me.
I don't see it happening in season. Just for
I hope you're right.
Yeah, I'm hoping. I'm really hoping. Just because it doesn't make sense for them to do it. It really doesn't make sense. There would be no reason for them to try to work that out now, especially with Chevy's busy, right?
We got to remember the data we're talking about is like hieroglyphics to how the Winnipeg Jets operate. Yep. The first thing that comes first, Neil Pionk is loved within the organization. That's priority number 1. He loves to be here. He's got a family here. He's ingrained himself. He's a good foot soldier. That comes first in Winnipeg. Everything else is secondary. I'm nervous, especially with how long they've been chasing top 4 right-handed D. They're going to make the same mistake they made a few years back. They're 100% going to do it. Until July 1 comes and he's somewhere else, I'm firmly believing we're making the big mistake here.
Even from the player's side, though, I don't think it'll happen in season, because if you're Neil Pionk in the middle of your career year where you're about to blow up every stat you've ever had, are you really going to go, yeah, I'll take less to stay in Winnipeg now just because? If I'm the player, I'm taking that as long as I can to try to get more out of the organization, even if I want to stay. Say I want to remain in Winnipeg, I'm still going to try to get every dollar I possibly can out of the org. It wouldn't make sense to sign it right away, especially if you're crushing it like this in all the stats where teams love to overpay for. Even from the player side, I don't see it making sense in season.
If you're a player who finally got his opportunity, is beloved here despite the clear flaws in it, has a young family here you don't want to pack up. Moving sucks. That's the one thing I always get reminded in these conversations. Moving stinks even for these guys. Someone that's ingrained himself in the community with a young family, and someone that still might get a raise on his current contract to stay in a small market where things are pretty affordable relative to some of the other big markets. And the whole idea of injury risk. This is someone that it's well documented, has faced many injuries over the last few years, and it's impacted his game. I'm just saying, it would not surprise me at all if we end up hearing within the next month that they've come to terms on a contract.
God, what a Christmas gift it would be if we find out internally that they're prioritizing Ehlers over Pionk to try to get that contract done. What a Christmas miracle it would be.
You know, I want to know my hottest take.
Hit me.
I'm not sure I'd sign either of them.
Either of them? No, you'd let them both walk.
I don't think the Winnipeg Jets should give up their flexibility and their cap space coming up this summer until they see how this year plays out. And the one thing, and I know I'm the big Ehlers guy, the one concern I do have with signing Nick Ehlers long term, outside just the injuries, is just the idea that his game is so predicated on speed that I would be a little bit concerned going into his late 30s with that.
With Ehlers, though, you're going to have way more cost certainty than you will with a contract on Pionk, just because of, again, all the injuries, the reduced stats in goals and assists and ice time and those type of things, right, that are generally held in pretty high regard when it comes to negotiations.
Comes down to AAV for me there.
Yeah, and I think...
Like if it's under an 8, sign me up.
I think they can do that.
I get nervous.
I think they can get it under an 8 with Ehlers because they can do the extra year that he won't get on the open market. So I think they can make that work here with Ehlers, and you get that little bit of cost certainty that you're not going to get with Pionk, who's going to get way over the value out on the open market. Whereas I don't know if Ehlers goes out to market if he's going to get the massive overpay that a Pionk would get, who's a little bit more of it's a position that's more sought after, right? The right-handed D on the open market. So yeah, I think there, little silver linings I'm hoping for that we get lucky on this one, and we end up in a Dustin Byfuglien, not an Andrew Ladd situation.
We shall see. It's my biggest fear, my man. It's my biggest fear. Now let's take a look at the Winnipeg third pair combos, and Garrett made this a lot easier on social media today rather than pulling up all the different combos. We've seen 4 different groups get a chance to play on the Winnipeg Jets third pair, and when looking at them by underlying metrics, we got Heinola Miller, we got Fleury Miller, Stanley Heinola. Is there any guesses in which third pair, from what you've seen, has been the most productive for Winnipeg, and which ones are the least productive for the Winnipeg Jets?
If I'm going just off of the eye test, I'm going to say it's Ville Heinola and Colin Miller. They're the ones that have not looked like they've been completely cratered in every time they touch the puck. They can make a pass to save their lives as opposed to some of the other people who have played on that third pairing. So, yeah, I would say Heinola Miller would definitely be the one from the eye test who would be in the positives.
Yes, by the rankings, it goes Heinola Miller, Fleury Miller, Stanley Heinola, which should be no surprise, and I can't believe they've even tried it. It's safe to say a lot of people in the market weren't too upset that Logan Stanley would be missing 2 games, giving us a chance to see more Heinola Miller. It is clear, especially with the struggles of the second pairing, they can't afford to have a third pairing you can't trust at all. It's clear Arniel doesn't trust Heinola, despite him and Miller getting the most results. So we're in quite a pickle here because we got to think about it, man. How often are the Winnipeg Jets going to be able to say that they targeted a guy up in the first round, they traded up for him and retired his jersey number? Like, that's what we're battling here when it comes to the Logan Stanley conversation. They just won't quit him. You can only talk about it so much. I actually feel bad for the guy. It's become obvious to virtually everyone he's not an NHL player, outside a couple of meatheads that still think because he's 6'7", he could play a sport on ice that doesn't matter how tall you are. And the vast amount of players that big have not succeeded in this league. I still saw someone on Facebook talking about Chara and him and how he's developing every game. I think that person needs to actually open their eyeballs when they're watching the game. I'm hoping. The big thing is Dylan Sandberg's coming back, starting to skate on the 27th. I'm hoping there's a bit of maybe a mushroom trip. Get Scotty Arniel on the old shrooms over the Christmas holidays, and maybe he'll have like a mental resurgence on what actually can be successful on the third pair here.
So we need to set up an ayahuasca ceremony for him, strip the ego down. Yeah, it's man, I don't understand it. From an eye test standpoint, when you're watching the game, you can clearly see that Stanley doesn't have the speed to keep up. He can't make a pass. He loses his guy, and half the time it's not even that he's lost his guy. He hasn't identified either who his player is supposed to be to pick up or where the threat with the puck is. It's frustrating, and then when you pull up the numbers, it shows exactly that. It craters when he's part of that pairing. You know, we talk a lot about Ville Heinola and wanting to see him get some run because we know that he's got the physical tools that the Jets are kind of missing, and we want to know if that talent will translate into an NHL game. But then you look also at Colin Miller as the common denominator on the positive version of that third pairing each time. And that's another guy who keeps getting press boxed for weird, no explanation. It's strange. It is the personnel decisions when it comes to that third pairing don't make sense when you look at it from a hockey reason. So you kind of then have to take a step back and go, okay, well then what are the meta reasons, right? What are the extracurricular things that are causing this? What at practice is happening that Scott Arniel looks at that grouping and goes, no, Ville Heinola has to sit in the press box. No, Colin Miller's going to sit in the press box. And we're going to put out, you know, it doesn't make sense to me. It truly doesn't.
So I woke up to an interesting tweet actually today asking my opinions on something here that kind of plays into the meta conversation you're talking. So I'm glad you went there. So I woke up to a tweet at Nik Lineham. Jackets mean something. And I think in the room, jackets mean something I think in the room and are some kind of tell I think about how teammates think your effort level is, which being in a room that had like player of the game, stuff like that through junior and stuff, would definitely agree with that analysis of how that's interpreted within a room. Could be wrong, but think Chibi in 5 games has 2 and 1 last year. Heinola 0, Stan a few for blocking shots or fighting. Lambo may have 1. What's my POV? So my takeaway here is I think it's very obvious. We've heard like the beat writers talk about it who are around that room. The Jets clearly don't want to quit him. We saw Mark Scheifele and Logan Stanley bond over the whole nothing better than beating the Leafs W thing. It's clear that Logan Stanley, the dude, is loved in that dressing room. At the same time, my response was, as for the jacket, probably fair inferences to read into with who players like and are looking to pick up. Because that's one thing with those jackets too. I remember in my time, you always wanted to, if like someone that doesn't necessarily get the praise and admiration, you want to try and give that guy a boost and say, hey, we appreciate you, we see you. But when it comes to like the Stanley jacket, I mean, Logan Stanley got a jacket for fighting Dennis Gilbert, 2 AHLers scrapping at the next draw after he blown an assignment causing a goal against. I'm not reading into the jacket so much. And again, this is a core group of players that I think's been coddled too much and could use a little bit of not getting their way. So that's just my thoughts on the meta version. At some point, the Winnipeg Jets are going to have to get a little uncomfortable again.
Yeah. Is it so with the team jackets, is it the players or the coaches that are picking the player at the end of the game? It's the players, right? Players. So yeah. Here's kind of my thoughts on that kind of whole thought process. I agree. I definitely agree that when it comes to things like blocked shots, getting into fights, quote unquote, standing up for your team, putting your body on the line, those things are going to play very heavy and very well with other players in the room, because that's a guy that's putting his body and his physical safety on the line for you. Right? You're looking at that and going, he's doing that so that I don't have to go fight that AHL scrub. He's doing that, and I'm not the one throwing myself in front of that 87, mile an hour slap shot. Yes, that is absolutely going to play well with those guys in the room. That is a good thing overall. Does that equate to winning hockey games? No, unfortunately it doesn't. And if we're going to eschew winning hockey games for trying hard and putting in a good effort, then we need to strip back most of the salary we have on this team, get back to being more of a cap floor. No, I'm serious. Get back to being more of a cap floor team. Look at what the team was like in the first 3 to 4 years of being here. And that'll be the type of, games that we'll have to go out and watch. And yeah, it'll be fun to watch them lose, 9-8 to Philadelphia some nights. like it used to be. And, we can move on. We can trade Connor Hellebuck and stop trying to win a championship. Or we can realize that while guys are going to like that type of stuff, that doesn't equate to winning hockey games and winning championships. When Ville Heinola is out there and, a guy is a lot bigger than him and he's able to push him off the puck, that is very obvious to the naked eye, right? As a fan, you can watch that and see that happen, and it's very easy to understand that. What's not easy to understand is watching Logan Stanley and noticing when he's missed his assignment or lost the thread of the puck, or, you know what I mean? Those things are more nuanced and not as obvious, and a lot of times happening away from the play. So on TV, you're not seeing it at all. And at the arena, you're only seeing it if you're specifically staring at Logan Stanley. That's why the numbers are so important to look at afterwards and go, hey, shit, he's on the ice for way more shots against than for. And hey, he's on the ice for way more goals against than for, and way more high danger chances, because he is. Like, it's not that these numbers are inventing something in his game. It's just looking at what he's doing and writing it down. And at a certain point, you have to look at that and go, he's not bringing a positive impact to that group, and it's not furthering our agenda of winning hockey games. So yeah, he's probably beloved in the locker room, loved by management, but if he's not helping you win a hockey game, at a certain point, the results have to take over the relationship if you want to be one of those top echelon teams. And if you don't, that's also fine. Let your fans know that. Trade off the big salary now, stock up the cupboards again, do a full quote unquote rebuild, and just stay in that cycle over and over again, and just not worry about cashing those playoff checks. And then you don't have to, we'll stop complaining about it, because that'll be the expectation.
Have Stan be the old reliable Mark Stewart mold in that setup and everything.
Yeah, he can ruin his own Jacob Trouba in the future.
I'm going to do a little slight correction. Oh, that means Salo is going to be beside Stan soon. Tough.
Oh, God.
Slight correction, though. Stan has been on for more goals than against. It's just every other aspect has cratered. And it's funny, too, because if you are watching a game, just watch how many times he puts his own teammates or line mates in a bad spot, which then fucks up everybody else. So we're never going to win this battle, apparently. We've been trying to have it since 2016, and the org's just smarter than everybody else, apparently. So we'll leave that one alone. We'll touch on goaltending real quick, because Connor Hellebuck continues to put up pretty wild numbers. And Eric Comrie, for a backup goalie, just above league average in save percentage, -1.5 goals saved above expected, giving what you probably expected from a league minimum backup, but has only gotten 8 goals of run support in his last 5 games. But let's look at Helly. Leads the league again, goals saved above expected at 19.7. The Winnipeg Jets have stopped, as a team, more goals above what they've been expected to give up than anyone, which we should expect with this team, having Connor Hellebuck. He leads the NHL in wins with 21, which is 5 more than any other goalie and more than 26 other teams have. Honestly, shout out Mike McIntyre for putting this together on Twitter. Shutouts, he's already at 4, first in the NHL. GAA is down at 207, and save percentage, 927, in a league that currently has a 900 save percentage as the average. Forget the Vezina. Should we start talking about the heart around Mr. Connor Hellebuck?
Yes, I 100% think we should. He is the most valuable player to his team. Now, you can argue about whether that's what the award actually goes to in the end or not. That's kind of been a little murky in the last little while, but it's usually just whoever has the most fucking points. But if you're actually going to look at it as an MVP type of award, fuck yeah, it should be Connor Hellebuck. Tell me anybody else who's more important to the success of their team as an individual than Hellebuck. It's what he's doing again is historic. He's setting NHL records. He set another one for this calendar year for American goaltenders in terms of shutouts, setting his 8th one. He's just at a completely different level right now. The Vezina's over. That's done. That's already got his name etched on it. We're not even that's not even a question. The question now should be how many Hart votes is he going to get? Not even will he. How many is he going to get? He may not win it, but fuck, he should get some of those votes.
Yeah, and in a more open league this year, in a more open MVP race, why not him?
Yeah, absolutely. It's just, especially in a year where you haven't had as many of the big stars go off, right? You get and more media attention on Connor Hellebuck. So yeah, let's go.
All right, to summarize, the Winnipeg Jets at a bigger picture glance, but the numbers at 5-on-5 score and venue adjusted. They are a team that's sitting at 50.2% at shot attempts, not ideal, though slightly ahead. They are sitting at 49.31 expected goals as a team. Again, not the type of output you want to see from a team you're expecting to go on a deep run. These are going to catch up to them. Right now, they are a top 3 team in finishing above what they're expected to, and we've seen that story before. I don't expect that to sustain. I expect the goaltending side of it too. Don't expect to see what the Jets are generating compared to what they're producing too. There's going to have to be improvements at the 5-on-5 game, both defensively, which will be helped big time by Dylan Sandberg coming back, one of the MVPs of this roster, as we've now seen, and figuring something out differently when it comes to the offensive side of the game at 5-on-5. And they might have those answers in-house. Whether they're willing to go to them, we'll see. But that's kind of my summary, as I, at the 35 game mark, would call the first place Winnipeg Jets a first-round paper tiger at this point. Sorry to say.
So they're paper planes, is what I'm hearing.
Paper planes, yeah. Paper planes. But there's some other storylines around the team. We got to see 2 former Winnipeg Jets captains sit down for a podcast.
Yeah, I heard about this. I haven't had a chance to really get into it too much. Can you fill me in?
Yeah, you know me. Of course, it's the first thing I turned on as soon as I saw this thing existed. And it was really interesting because it was hosted by what seems to be who Ladd and Wheeler both see as like a leadership coach. So it's clearly a guy that's connected to both, understands both, knows both very well. And it was so interesting to me to see the contrast between Ladd and Wheeler. And my biggest takeaways were Andrew Ladd could walk into a dressing room today and be a very strong leader in today's environment. And Blake Wheeler was just the worst choice the Winnipeg Jets could have made. The fact, and I thought Jeff Hamilton really nailed it on social media this weekend, taking a lower run at Mark Chipman, who still praises earlier this year the leadership of Blake Wheeler. If you listen to that podcast, you could come away with multiple reasons not to give that guy the captain. And every rumor and everything that was true, the reasons I was called the Winnipeg Jets QAnon was bringing up the problems with Blake Wheeler. And you saw it on full display in a podcast. Like, he clearly does not have the emotional intelligence to lead a room of people. That's first and foremost. And that has to be one of the biggest factors of a leader in a competitive environment. It was also an interesting podcast because I do think it also did humanize Blake Wheeler a little bit. There was clear reflection in there on his time in Winnipeg, some of the stuff he did wrong. But I also came away with the idea that it was clear like he's going through that reflection process. He's not done it like fully, because there was times when like he'd be reflecting and then later on the podcast he'd come out with that side that made him a poor leader, and would get kind of his back up against the wall when certain things were suggested. So I think it was interesting to hear like someone that's I think would be a strong leader in Andrew Ladd, who was obviously a big part of this team getting off the ground, and Blake Wheeler sit across from each other and have those conversations about leadership. I would recommend it as a listen, but it further, honestly, it tied 2 things together because obviously we talked a lot last night about EP40 and the idea of going and getting the disgruntled player. And I've had some pushback online about, don't go get a guy that's in the middle of a locker room problem. The Jets are going to have to do their due diligence. After this Wheeler stuff, would you trust the Winnipeg Jets' ability to do due diligence on what is a locker room problem or not? Because they still believe that this guy was a captain. So it's not something I would buy into when it comes to the Winnipeg Jets selling that kind of message. This was a guy that ran Patty Lyne out of town. This is a guy and it's unfortunate because he was probably the best player at his peak in Winnipeg. But I listened to that podcast and came away with this guy never should have been given a C. Never mind a captain of a team under a coach who just left it to the room. Paul Maurice, his hands are all over this too in this conversation, despite he's gotten the cozy golden parachute departure.
Yep.
His hands are all over that too. But I thought it was stunning that just from that hour of listening to, you could tell that was a mistake from day one.
Yeah, so when it comes to the organization at that top level, I think it's fairly clear to some of us that Mark Chipman is the, effective, hockey vice president is kind of what he's appointed himself. And he gets involved in these type of hockey decisions, which maybe he shouldn't be. It really feels like that Mark Chipman, Paul Maurice, Blake Wheeler pipeline was kind of setting the tone for the locker room to have that issue, that culture problem that we saw for, that stretch over here. It really feels like they need to have a buffer between Chipman and the rest of the hockey ops department sometimes. Because it feels like we've been on that for years. I feel like they need that buffer between, because you can't have a guy like Blake Wheeler where it sounds like is a much more selfish person when it comes to his leadership style than what you would want from an NHL captain. And when it's in such stark contrast with Andrew Ladd, who, like you said, could probably walk in and still figure out how to be an NHL captain right now, did it for 6 or 7 years straight here in Winnipeg, multiple Stanley Cups, one as a rookie. Like, that's the guy that, you would look to for leadership and for guidance. And like you said, Blake Wheeler at his peak was definitely the most skilled guy on the Jets roster. He was one of the best right wingers in the league when he was on his game at his best. So, but that doesn't always mean that you're the best leader. That doesn't mean that you're going to be the best guy to lead and to show others what to do and how to do it. Gretzky was the best player and a fucking terrible coach. It just, sometimes it's not translatable. Sometimes that's not what your skill is. And yeah, it's interesting though that he hasn't really learned from it, that self-reflection hasn't really hit him yet. And maybe it'll come with time, and maybe it won't. Some people never get that ability to really look in and see where the issues were. So yeah, it doesn't leave a lot of faith that they still kind of stand by that and say, wow, what a great captain, what a great leader, when again, we have eyes, we have ears, we were there, we could see what happened. It kind of relates into the very beginning of the show with the Scott Arniel. Well, we're talking about a first place team here. Yeah, we are, but we also can see how that first place team doesn't start playing until they're halfway through the second period some nights. And unfortunately, some nights is more often than not. So, if I ever hear the words, we really liked our game one more time, I'll probably cry, because I can just hear both Wheeler and Maurice spouting that off. So I never want to hear those words again. I'm not really surprised that Wheeler hasn't learned, but at least they made a good call with Lowry this time around.
And I'll say this with Wheeler. I think it's a positive thing. Like, you should expect people to grow. And I think he did show some growth in this episode. And I think it's important for people to self-reflect, try and figure their own stuff out. I know it's something I try and make a habit of with my own shit. So it's positive he's working with somebody, I think, on this aspect. But it also just, was very telling. Though I have a question for you that I know Tony, who's always part of our post-game streams, has kind of asked my take on, and he's got an interesting take on this as well. What do you think of the idea, though, that even after Wheeler was stripped, the room gave back the leadership to Wheeler in the second half of bonuses year, and they weren't able to grab that team by the balls with the opening until he was completely out of the room? Does that tell us anything about the Winnipeg Jets core? Because I think that's an interesting question.
So I kind of look at it from two standpoints. One, going back to the Logan Stanley discussion, the players in the room are going to side with a guy that they see as either quote unquote one of their own or protecting them, right? That's going to always kind of be where the guys in the room are going to go. They're generally probably not going to always pick the quote unquote best leader, the guy that's going to set the right tone for them. The other thing too is, I don't know if you've ever been around a bully and a group of people. Yeah, a lot of times people will just kind of capitulate to what the bully is wanting to say or do because it's easier than fucking having to listen to him bitch and moan about it afterwards. And the other part too is Wheeler's game falls off when he's not mentally attached. He's one of those guys that needs to be fully into it mentally to have his game on the ice be producing. And if he's bitching and moaning and complaining and sulking about not being captain, that game on the ice isn't going to be there either. So yeah, there are reasons why I can see it still being handed back to him when he's still in the room. But I still don't think that means that he was the right choice by any stretch of the imagination, even then.
Yeah, the fascinating thing for me is I'm really curious when the org and him do like the whole 1 day thing. I imagine that comes, but I do wonder if there's going to need to be like a decompression period between both things, because we also saw this week like Matt Duchene talk about getting bought out and how that impacts a player. And some of the stories I've heard, it sounds like Wheeler handled that side of it pretty personally.
Yep.
So that's the one big question I have left for that relationship. On the idea of the core and not being able to wrestle away the leadership from Blake Wheeler, I think you raised some interesting points on just interpersonal dynamics. I'll also say this: I do think Adam Lowry's been a very good choice as far as like a different approach within that room. I do think the players could afford to get a little more uncomfortable, as we've talked about. With it seems like they really get a run of who they want to play with, who's like the favorite to play, all that kind of stuff. But I'll also say this: like I was talking to a player with the Jets that was there through the Wheeler days and through part of the last few years that had said last year was the best year he had in Winnipeg. He absolutely loved it. The room was a lot tighter knit. It was a real good group of guys that was pulling the right way. The difference was noticeable. So I'm not sure I'm concerned about that moving forward. I think they did a really good job of bringing in some quality guys to help the Winnipeg core with that dynamic, like a guy like Nino Niederreiter, for example, a guy like Dylan DeMello, despite the struggles on the ice. I do think he embodies a lot of that kind of stuff. So I do think they've found support players that bring leadership aspects on top of actually being quality players outside the whole like Matt Hendricks type. So I do think they've addressed it, but I do still find that dynamic interesting that Tony brings up when factoring in the top side of an organization.
Yeah, you can definitely tell the vibes are different with this group. That locker room is not having the same issues that they were having as a group when things were real bad a couple seasons ago. So it's definitely improved. You can see it by their reactions on the ice, their reactions in post games, even after losses. You feel a different sense of accountability, a different sense of less panic, less anger even. And it's in my opinion, it's a good thing. I really like the new approach that we've seen that started under the bonus era and now into the Arniel one. So I'll give them that. I will give them that. So
let's have some fun before we get out of here. It's been a long episode, but we had actually put out there. It's our last big recording outside the post-game show Monday. If you're listening to this, come stop in at the landing strip after the Toronto Maple Leafs game. You could call in. You could be a part of the show through the chat. The interaction we've gathered has been a lot of fun, and I've enjoyed getting to hear different inputs and just sharing our opinion off of those inputs. There's a lot of different ways to build a winning team, a lot of different ideas. But put out an idea here for Christmas. What would you want Santa to bring the Winnipeg Jets? And we got some responses here, so I'm going to read out every response we got. I want to hear your thoughts on that response, and then I'm going to ask you at the end, what would you like if you could have one gift for Santa to bring the Winnipeg Jets this year? How does that sound?
Let's do it.
So over on Facebook, Ben Morris had suggested Ryan O'Reilly and a top 4 right-handed D. How would you like Santa delivering both Ryan O'Reilly and a top 4? So I'm guessing not a top pairing guy. Second pairing right-handed
Second
D.
pairing. I like it in terms of depth, absolutely. That's, the spots that we want to address. But for a group that we have right now with the players that we have in the window we have, I still want to shoot higher. I want a bigger present from Santa than just that this year.
Hey, you gotta put the nice things on the Christmas list. Obviously, that type of setup fills the 2 holes. We saw what Ryan O'Reilly could do to a team in the playoffs, as we were the first team knocked out by that St. Louis team. I haven't admittedly watched much Nashville this year. I don't know where his game's at his older age, but Ben's targeting the right areas. We'll say that. But I'm with you. I'm asking Santa for a little more.
Yep.
Mike Ryans, and I'm beginning to think he's just trolling me at this point, but I know he was a big Stanley guy. Says Stanley squared for Christmas from Santa. Do you want to get the old DNA machine out and clone Logan Stanley?
Oh God, no! What are we talking about? What are we doing?
Yeah, you know my answer there. Phyllis suggests we need a center for Ehlers. And we need someone who roams the ice looking for people to crunch into the boards and to keep them from scoring on Helly or Comrie. So we need a 2C for Ehlers and a big bruising defenseman. Mikey, how do you feel about Phyllis's suggestion here from Old St. Nick?
Love a 2C for Ehlers. Would love somebody that can come in and give him the centerman that he so sorely deserves. Personally, would I actually just kind of like that centerman to be Mark Scheifele and kind of move other things around? Yeah. But since that's definitely probably not going to happen at the moment under, the way it's currently constructed, I would love to see that happen. In terms of a big bruising defenseman, they can be big, but they still have to be able to play. They still got to be able to skate. Size can't be the only determining factor. It can be a tiebreaker. It can be a piece, but my biggest concern for the back end isn't actually size. Mine is still going to be somebody who can skate and make a first pass out of the zone cleanly. But I love where she's going because, they need some depth there too.
Yeah, no, I like where she's going as well. 2C continues to be a thing we've talked about on and on and on. I'm sure it will continue to be one. We're going to see who's available out there as this year goes on. I do think the decor could use some size, but I think, like you said, the size has to come with ability to move this game north. Without that, it feels like it'll help, but not nearly as much as this team probably needs from the back end.
Yep.
Justin says over on Facebook, as has been the case for almost the entire time the Jets have been back. Upgrades on defense, please. Justin would like to see 2 right-handed defensemen coming into Winnipeg. What do you think of that ask?
Ooh, 2. I don't think they need it, to be honest. I don't think they need 2 right-handed defensemen. I think they need 1 to really fill that spot, and I think they have enough guys in terms of depth to play behind. And I really, this is banking on Dylan DeMello is back, and I'm hoping that that's the case, and I'm gonna play it as it is. So yeah, I'm really thinking they only need the 1 big right-handed D. If they want to find depth at the NHL level, that's never a bad thing. You have to worry about contracts and waivers and those type of issues. But for the most part, I really would rather them focus on 1 big name ad on the D as opposed to 2 smaller ones.
Yes, I agree with you when it comes to that as well. The way I see it, if you were to go that route, it almost feels like when they did the Schmidt plus Dylan thing, when realistically they probably needed a top 3 type guy that just would push everybody down a peg. I look at the right side. You got DeMello, Miller, Pionk. I'd want to upgrade 1 in the top 4 and get that, or preferably the top pair, and get that, like we talked about up front, get that domino effect to bring a guy lower where he can excel in softer minutes. So, and I think when you look at what we've been talking about offensively and them outproducing what they're actually inputting, I think it would actually hurt the Jets come playoff time if they aren't able to score enough. And I wouldn't want to allocate all my assets just to the D side of the puck when they could really use the center still.
Yep, totally agree.
Ross over on Facebook as well says beefy defense with skills, like we were just talking about. Ross gets it.
Yep.
And then throws out a name out there that's gonna have us all wanting him back. Is there a big buff player that even in existence nowadays? Talk about the perfect ad for this Winnipeg Jets team.
Can you imagine getting a prime Dustin Byfuglien dropped into this group right now on the right hand side?
Oh, good God.
It would be, we talked about, Elias Pettersson up front on the postgame show quite a bit yesterday being a game changer. Can you imagine prime Dustin Byfuglien right now on that top pairing with Josh Morrissey?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's over. I'm fine. Play your 30 minutes a night. This is over. Let's go.
Mitch over there on Facebook as well had said his gift from Santa had already come true, not having to watch 64 for the next 2 games. Continues to be an indictment on the Winnipeg Jets org that its own fan base sees injuries as a way of the team actually getting better.
Yep.
As someone that likes to be like pro worker, pro union and whatnot, never want to see a guy get hurt, but the Winnipeg Jets continue to put us in the unfortunate spot as fans and analysts that realize the Jets seem to get better when injuries come. Dating all the way back to that Western Conference team, by the way.
Yep, going all the way back.
Cody on Twitter says, I hope Santa brings Arniel and his staff some brand new Vitamix so they can finally break out the blender on the 3 most used lines in the NHL. What do you think of Cody's request from jolly old St. Nick?
Cody's smart. Vitamix is the GOAT. That's the right blender, so he knows what's up. Yeah, I'll pitch in. We'll get them some Vitamixes because we gotta get this turning. Because yeah, they gotta move it up, man.
So you're saying I got the wrong blender if I didn't get a Vitamix, eh?
I mean, which one did you get? Did you get a Ninja?
I got a Ninja, of course. I'm a Ninja guy.
Nah, see, you got to get the Vitamix, bro. You got to get the Vitamix.
I've been a Ninja guy my whole life, but you know what? Now I might even play Jolly St. Nick on this one, and I might send a Vitamix to the Canada Life Center addressed to Scott Arniel as a message from the fan base, because I think Cody has a great answer here as to what the Winnipeg Jets could use from Santa this winter.
And hey, this isn't sponsored, but Vitamix, if you're listening and you want to sponsor us, hit us up, Top Line Winnipeg.
Yeah, I'll get rid of that Ninja in a hurry. Okay, a couple negative ones here that's going to spice this up, actually. And I wanted to give everyone that answer the opportunity to have their wish on the show. So Daryl over on Facebook says, truthfully, a new GM. Tired of the rinse and repeat, and I know all the arguments about a GM in a small market, but I don't know what we would lose by getting a new voice. Early regular season darlings to fall off the cliff come playoff time. What do you think of Daryl's wish here?
So, am I going to address this from a realistic standpoint or from my heart standpoint?
Whatever you please. We're in the content business, baby. Go
realistically, even if they did get a new GM, it's just going to be a retread of somebody else within the organization, because you have to be a True North guy to work at True North, which is kind of a bootstraps paradox. I don't know how you get the job initially without having the job initially, but hey, I'm not going to worry about that. That's timey-wimey stuff. As a gift from my heart, yeah, I'm kind of with them. We've seen only one vision, one voice, one plan the entire time that the team has been here. And after a while, you kind of start to look around the league and see other teams rebuild a lot quicker and other teams start out fresh and get a lot more success. And you go, hey, maybe there are other ways of doing things. Maybe, a fresh idea here and there would be beneficial, but it just, unfortunately, with the way that the structure of the organization is, I think we are going to see Kevin Cheveldayoff at the helm of this team until he retires, until he has decided that he no longer wants to work in hockey anymore. I don't see any stretch of results that will lead to his firing in any way, shape, or form. Mark Chipman has said publicly in multiple interviews that it's not results that keep Kevin Cheveldayoff in his position. It's the relationship that they've built. I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but not all that much. So, it is what it is. That's the guy. He's here until he doesn't want to be anymore. But I like the idea. I would be kind of open to a process of at least bringing in maybe some new AGMs, maybe, adding another assistant general manager to the group to try to learn something different. But yeah, it is what it is. I like it though. It's a good idea.
See, I have really complicated thoughts when it comes to Kevin Cheveldayoff as the GM of the Winnipeg Jets. I'm not super pro Chevy like a lot of this market, but I'm also not super anti at this stage. I was during the Maurice days, and I honestly truly believe since Paul Maurice left town, that Chevy's actually been on a bit of a heater here when it comes to quality moves to actually retool this on the fly and get a team where we're talking about they finished fourth in the regular season last year. They're in the top 3 in points percentage this year. And I think he's done some really quality work the last few years. Might be the best stretch of his career, if I'm being quite honest with myself. So that's where it gets complicated for me. Now, he made the bet on bringing the exact same team back. And if you get the same result out of it, I see the justification to move on and try a new voice. Here's where I land ultimately. The Winnipeg Jets and Kevin Cheveldayoff really remind me a lot of the Toronto Blue Jays. And it's quite a frustrating year-round process to be a fan of both, if I'm being honest. And here's my big wonder about Kevin Cheveldayoff. And it's the one thing he has left to answer for me. I think he's, like I said, I think he's had a scorcher over 3 years here that's actually kept this organization in a place where we can even talk about them buying and competing. And I think that's praiseworthy, and there's credit there. The one question I have is, does Kevin Cheveldayoff have the stones to put a team over the top? Now, we've seen him get this team to a level where they're consistent first-round team, and there's value in that. But there's also all this talk that they keep saying they want to be more, they want to do more, they want to do more. And the one thing I wonder, and it's the same thing with the Jays, they get stuck on a valuation, and at some point, you're going to have to be able to be willing to pay that price to get that impact to put yourself over. You're always going to, like the talker in baseball is, you're always going to come third place if you stick to your evaluations and trying to be sane about it. At some point, we are talking about winning bids. We are talking about beating other organizations' shots at certain guys. And that's my one question is, does he have the stones to go over the top with the big move and move off pieces of his drafting? Because that is the one area I do believe Kevin Cheveldayoff has really struggled, is just how much assets he drafts and holds on to as the value diminishes. Doesn't want to let them go. Like, even looking back to the Mark Stone thing, Jack Roslovic was the hold up there, you know what I mean? And that was a team that probably could have used a Mark Stone to help that push that year. So that is my big question. I think he's been a quality GM. I don't think he's anywhere near where a lot of people in Winnipeg want to put him when you're looking at the bigger scope of the NHL. And it's kind of funny, kind of leaving that president of hockey ops conversation we just had around Chipman. Does Kevin Cheveldayoff not seem like the perfect president of hockey ops, and then get a guy underneath him that maybe has a little risk tolerance, but Chevy kind of keeps him out from going overboard, having that kind of dynamic in a front office? Something I've thought about.
Yeah, that would be the kind of the ideal thing to help insulate the GM's office from some, maybe some ownership meddling that could occur. And we've seen it with other organizations in the NHL, where you get an owner who has decided that they are the president of hockey operations and they're going to make hockey decisions, and it just absolutely tanks a franchise, Francesco Aquilini. It happens, and I'm kind of worried that it's happening here in Winnipeg sometimes with some of the strange things that we see. Chevy would be the perfect spot, or the perfect person to fill a spot like that if the Jets ever went that route and brought in maybe a younger, more forward thinking, a little more, risk taking GM, somebody with connections across the league. Just, pie in the sky type thinking. Maybe down the road he'll want, some less hands-on work, and that'll be a path to do it. But yeah, at the moment, I don't see it happening anytime soon.
And then this one, I can't say I agree with this one, but Kim Boyko says, not a serious answer, but says that first and then says they're serious at the end, so I'm going to read it. Likeable stars. Does not feel very highly about Connor and Scheifele's personality. Says there is no personality on this team. They're boring as paint, watching paint dry. I mean, I am serious, but I'm also realistic. Thoughts on the Jets' personality?
So, yeah, I can kind of see where they're coming from a little bit in terms of off-ice personality. Mark Scheifele, Kyle Connor, you're not going to get the most exciting, engaging, interviews and snippets and things from those guys. But if you're talking about exciting on the ice, different story, right? It's a very fucking exciting team, whether you're excited by the goals they're scoring or frustrated by the ones that are all letting in. Like it's an exciting team, an exciting brand of hockey in that sense. If they want a likable, he's not quite a star, quote unquote, but fuck is he likable and great on the mic and the camera. Eric Comrie. I fucking every video I watch of Eric Comrie, I want to watch another one. Every time I find myself laughing and smiling. He's got great camera presence. He's smart. He's quick. He's funny. That he seems like a good guy. So that's my recommendation. Go out and watch those Eric Comrie videos, and you'll definitely have a better feeling towards maybe some of the players in the team. Because, you maybe aren't getting the best interviews from Scheifele and stuff, but Comrie makes up for it.
I honestly think that aspect of entertainment is why like so many people felt jaded by choosing Lyne over Wheeler, dating back to the conversation earlier in the show. Lyne obviously having quite the start, and he just has that personality that attracts people and has that fun side, though the 5-on-5 game has not been great since coming back. Might be the perfect tank player for your Habs, actually.
Yep.
Brings the ticket sales and the tanking, but gets those offensive power play goals. I mean, this team definitely could use some personality. I'm a guy that likes a little bit of ego, likes a little bit of flamboyance. I think that's valuable in sport. I do think there's an entertainment draw to it. Can't say I really think Hellebuck fits into the whole tool stuff, though I guess I could see it when people see him talk confidently after bad games. This is a guy that's going to be in the Hall of Fame. Like, Winnipeg is so lucky to have a guy like that as their star. And I do think Josh Morrissey's a very likable star on the back end. So they could use a big swing and get a star with some personality, but I do think that there is some things to like here.
They need a quote machine. They, when we lost that with Lyne, right? Winnipeg is good. It just that's what I think that's kind of what they're getting at with that comment is we don't have the player right now who is the quote machine, the guy that is gonna provide a little bit of levity, give you a bit of a laugh while still kind of understanding what's going on with the team and the organization. So yeah, like I can understand that. Like, Lowry's a pretty buttoned down, kind of serious guy with the media. Morrissey is nice, but not that, again, big and, over the top with the media and stuff. So yeah, I can kind of see a little bit where they're coming from. But again, I recommend it. Eric Comrie. Just watch anything you can that's got Comrie in it this year. That guy's the fucking best.
I guess that's hard to paint the star there, but yeah, you're not wrong.
Missing a bit on the star part, but
it's been a long one for the boys today. Let's end it off. What does Mikey want from Santa for Christmas from the Winnipeg Jets? Or for the Winnipeg Jets, sorry.
For the Winnipeg Jets. So, my answer for this was pretty locked in for a while until some recent news kind of started percolating and popping up out of Vancouver. So I'm going to say kind of two answers with that caveat. So the first one, the big one, just to get it out of the way, with all those rumors we're hearing out of Vancouver, all of the fighting going on between Elias Pettersson and JT Miller, it sounds like essentially we're going to have a loser leaves town WWE match right away with those two. If that is the case, and there is any hope, any chance, any possibility you can add Elias Pettersson to this team, fucking go and do that. Santa, if you're listening, I know I haven't been good, but please, they need that. That changes the entire outlook of this team. We get into it quite a bit yesterday on the landing strip, so if you want to hear us really hit it, just check out yesterday's episode, the post-game show from the Minnesota game. So that is, a very recent add to the Christmas list after hearing all that. But my answer for a while has been I kind of wanted Chevy to one-stop shop out in Long Island with Brock Nelson and Ryan Pulock. I haven't been as crazy about Pulock lately. Nelson still looks great. I think he's a great fit for that line if they can go out and do it. Barring that, the guy that I absolutely adore and would love to see in a Jets jersey going forward is Mackenzie Weegar. That's been my guy. That's been the ad that I've been drooling over since before the trade that brought him to Calgary. So that would definitely be the star name that I would love to see Santa bring me if he can't find me that Elias Pettersson jersey.
Yeah. if you go listen to the landing strip game 35 after Minnesota, I think I make the case on why Elias Pettersson would be the gift under the tree I'd be asking the Winnipeg Jets for. So since I let that out yesterday, I'm going to go a little different direction. And it's the ability to look within at other options. Like I said, maybe everybody collectively has a shrooms trip over the Christmas break, and they have some opening thoughts. And because you know what, I think they've built a good team here, and I think they limit themselves by getting stuck into the framework of how they think this thing's going to be successful. They definitely need to trade for some more talent before the playoffs, and that is the big thing. But you know what? Right now, since the deadline's a few months away, I just want Santa to bring them a sense of reflection, a sense of trying something new with this group. And that's kind of where I'm at with Santa's gift for me.
So what I'm hearing is that you're hoping Scott Arniel gets visited by 3 ghosts on Christmas Eve. The ghost of hockey past, the ghost of hockey present, and the ghost of hockey future to show him the error of his ways.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm hoping for. Give him the creative ability to try something, anything else. But then what's happening right now? And on the whole JT Miller stuff, I think it's important to remember too, JT Miller has a full new move clause in this. So who becomes the easier one to trade for real value?
And who's going to bring you more in that return as well? Right?
Like I said, there's
Pettersson's the easier one to move,
player.
and yeah, he gets you more in return. It's a no-brainer that you move that guy.
There is not a single player in Winnipeg's organization that should be off the table for that kind of trade.
Oh yeah,
Not a
agreed.
single one.
Zero. Whatever they want, we're doing it.
But hey, that was a great chat. This is a long one for the folks. Thanks for tuning in. We'll be back Monday for the landing strip after the Toronto game before Christmas. Want to wish all of you a Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays. Hope it treats you well. And I guess we'll be back tonight by the time this releases. So have a great Monday. We'll talk to you later.
Have a great day, everybody. Happy holidays.
This has been a Top Lyne Media production.